Welcome to Sykes, the Bottom Line Pharmacy Podcast, your regular dose of pharmacy CPA advice to fuel your bottom line, featuring pharmacists, key vendors, and other innovators.
You can call me, because we the best. Sykes and Company, we the best.
Welcome to this episode of Sykes, the Bottom Line Pharmacy Podcast. We're happy to have a special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Kendall. We're going to have some fun, folks. My name is Jeff Baird. I'm an attorney, meaning I'm the black sheep of the family. And I head up the healthcare group of Brown Fortunato. We're a Texas-based law firm. We have 17 full-time healthcare attorneys, and we work with pharmacies and other healthcare providers throughout the United States. And we've been working with Scotty and Kendall and Bonnie for many, many years. And it's always an honor to work with Sykes and Company. They are the best of the best. So, Kendall, it's my pleasure to be able to do this with you.
Yes, and woke up early this morning to join us. Usually you're in Texas, but today, Salt Lake, correct?
That's correct.
So thank you for getting us started early, but you look like you're ready to rock and roll with this topic.
I've been up for a while, so we're in good
so
shape.
Excited to have you with us, Jeff.
He is ready. So today we're going to be talking about protecting the buyer in a stock purchase, Jeff. This is right up your alley with the M&A transactions you guys are doing all the time, day in and day out. I know we work with you on a lot of those. So why don't you kind of just start us off on,
Sure.
What does that mean? What is a stock purchase, and what do you mean by protecting the buyer there?
You bet. And then if I start rambling too much, Scotty and Bonnie and Kendall, maybe as an attorney, I charge by the word. And so if I start rambling too much, then shut me down.
We've learned this at the, and I'm going to do a quick plug for the NCPA ownership workshop. Jeff does these alongside us and some others in the industry every 3 months or so each year. So this is one of the topics that we touch on, Jeff, a lot, is with the buyer and with the stock purchase and some other many different topics. But if you were looking to purchase a pharmacy or a startup,
Sure.
It's definitely a good place to start.
Yeah, ownership has been going on for many, many years. And you talk about getting a lot of bang for the buck. It's absolutely worth everybody's time and money.
Yep.
And of all the conferences that I do and speak at, ownership is by far my favorite. It really is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But going back to your question, Scotty, there are essentially two ways to buy a pharmacy: asset purchase or a stock purchase. And let me just give you the hypothetical. Scotty owns Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc. So Scotty Sykes individually owns Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc. Jeff Baird wants to purchase Scotty's Pharmacy. I can do so one of two ways. One way is an asset purchase, which is not what we're going to go into today, but let me give you the Cliff's Note version. Asset purchase is I set up my own corporation or LLC. I'll call it Jeff's Pharmacy, Inc. And my corporation will just purchase all of the assets from Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc. My corporation will purchase Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc.'s inventory and computers and delivery trucks and bubble gum and paper clips and everything else. Everything will come over to my corporation. But then what happens is after all the dust settles, Scotty continues to own Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc., except that it no longer has any assets. It's just a shell corporation. Everything's come over to my corporation, and I've got to go out now and get my own pharmacy license and DEA permit and NPI. I need to sign up with PBMs and a PSAO and do everything that essentially a startup pharmacy would have to do. Okay, that's an asset purchase. Now let's compare that to a stock purchase. Instead, let's see here we go. Instead, with a stock purchase, the purchaser is not Jeff's Pharmacy, Inc., but the purchaser is Jeff. The seller is not Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc., but the seller is Scotty. And what he's doing is he's selling to me a piece of paper. That's it. And that piece of paper is a stock certificate. And what that means then is that Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc. just continues on like it always has, just continues to do business and bring in money and take care of customers. The only difference is there's a new sheriff in town. Scotty's out with all the money that I've paid him. He's now sitting on a beach in Kabul. And I am now the proud owner of Scotty's Pharmacy, Inc. And so I've inherited this thing lock, stock, and barrel. It is now my baby to do what I want with it. As a general rule, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, the pharmacy as a going concern that I've bought, its pharmacy license stays in place, its DEA permit stays in place, NPI stays in place, PBM and PSAO contracts stay in place. It just continues on. But the only difference is Scotty's out and I'm in as the owner, and that's it.
Bank accounts too, Jeff, right? They usually just stay and they get switched over to the new owner.
Say it again.
Bank accounts, same thing. Yeah. Everything, it really stays. Yep.
Everything stays. It's just, again, with a stock purchase, the corporation just continues on like it always has. I mean, certainly I could get real granular with you and talk about change of ownership notifications, things like that. But just from a 30,000-foot view, that's how it works.
Uh-huh. Yep. So we always we get a lot of calls about, hey, I'm buying this pharmacy, or from prospective buyers out there, and well, it's always like, well, what are you buying? And they don't know. Usually they're like the pharmacy. And they're like, well, what are you buying? Are you buying the assets? Are you buying the stock? So that's kind of step one. Like, what are you buying in this process? Are you looking to target the assets or the whole? Yeah.
And Scotty, the three of you being CPAs, you know that there are tax ramifications. I mean, I guess we won't go into that right now, but there is a big difference from a tax standpoint. And so always at the very beginning, the buyer and the seller have to decide, will this be a stock purchase or an asset purchase? And basically years ago, virtually all of the pharmacy acquisitions that we handled were asset purchases. That's now changed. Now it seems like most of the pharmacy acquisitions that our law firm handles are stock purchases. And the reason for that is that with an asset purchase, the purchasing corporation, or LLC, has got to go out and get its own license and numbers and certificates and everything else. Now, from a practical standpoint, with an asset purchase, let's say closing occurs on February 1st. My corporation will likely be able to continue to operate under the pharmacy license and everything else of Scotty's Pharmacy Inc. I can be able to do that. But nevertheless, until I get my own license and permit and everything else, but nevertheless, with an asset purchase, there are a bunch of things that my corporation has to do. With a stock purchase, it's a lot easier because the corporation that I bought just continues on like it always has. Again, there are some steps you have to take with giving change of ownership notifications. But that's kind of the transition we've seen from asset to stock, and I guess one of the main reasons that we've seen clients want to engage in a stock purchase is because the selling pharmacy has some third-party contracts that are really hard to come by. And by purchasing the stock, then those third-party payor contracts normally remain intact with a purchasing corporation, with the corporation that's just been purchased.
So one of the things that we see a lot too, so another question we get when people come to us, maybe they know they're going to do a stock purchase. So let's say they've gotten that far. And they say, we're getting a great deal with this $2 million transaction, $4 million transaction. And we say, oh, how do you know that? And they're just like, well, sounds good. But tell us about what kind of things you've got to look into to actually know if that is a good deal.
Absolutely. And I call this due diligence, and I call this kicking the tires. Now, before I go into this, understand, I want to dispel an urban legend. Many people think that if I, Jeff Baird, purchase the stock of Scotty's Pharmacy Inc., then I, Jeff Baird, have now assumed all of the liabilities of Scotty's Pharmacy Inc. That's not true. I have not. However, the corporation that I bought continues to have those liabilities. And so if I have...
And I'm not a pharmacist, so there's probably a lot of them.
Yeah. It's a scary situation.
That's a good point. And so, let's say closing occurs on February 1st. And let's say, I don't know, in August, I discover that prior to my buying the stock of Scotty's Pharmacy Inc., he did some crazy stuff in the past. Now, all of a sudden, this corporation that I bought is getting hit with some audits and investigations and chargebacks and everything else. Well, that's not my personal problem. Nobody can come after me for that. So my condominium in Aspen is now protected.
Good.
But
I didn't get an invite to that, did you?
Yeah. But I would be invited to Bonnie's house in the lake.
Oh gosh. And I'm
The
guessing,
mansion on the lake,
I'm
yeah.
guessing that the issue was probably some shoddy tax work on that in that example.
Are you kidding me? We got the best CPA team around here.
We do.
If I was doing it, yeah. No.
The Sykes and Company. But what happens is the thing that I bought has got to deal with it.
Right.
And to use a Texas term, I'm hoping that on February 1, when I handed a large check to Scotty, I'm hoping I didn't buy, to use a Texas term, a pig in the poke. Now, so the key is to do your due diligence before closing, and that's just like, it's no different than buying a house. If I'm going to buy a house, before I buy it, I'm going to hire an inspector to go in, check the electrical wiring, the plumbing, the foundation, termites, so on and so forth. And if the inspector comes back and says, no, this house is going to be a money pit, I walk away. Same thing with due diligence with a pharmacy. And so what's going to happen is there are 3 types of due diligence. One of the most important parts is what I call the financial due diligence. Now, I'm a decent healthcare attorney, but I'm a really bad accountant. And so what that means then, and this is the shout out to Sykes and Company, is that Sykes and Company is the best nationally when it comes to pharmacy, representing pharmacies in the accounting space. And so what Sykes does, Sykes and Company, in fact, Bonnie and Scotty and Kendall, you might want to actually talk about what you look at. You have 3 types of due diligence: financial, transactional, and healthcare regulatory. I consider the financial to be, the corporation that I'm buying. I know what the financials that Scotty has given me say, but are they really true? Are they really accurate? And so, Bonnie, I'll pass this back to you.
No, that's a perfect example. You can't just take the financials as gospel. Or what we see a lot of is maybe we don't even see a financial to start with. Maybe it's just the tax return. A lot of people want to say, here's the tax return. Well, a tax return doesn't really give you a full picture of how that pharmacy is operating. We think it's important to get, yes, financials are great. The tax return, yes, we need that. And then we also like to look at the actual accounting file itself. That's where the guts and the detail is.
Yeah, you want to get in that accounting file.
And you want to make sure they all match and that they're all right. And 9 times out of 10, we're seeing that they're not, and so then there's an issue. And so that's a big part of that due diligence you mentioned, is really digging into the guts of the books. And if someone really wants to sell that pharmacy, they shouldn't have any issue with you looking at these things.
But it's also important not only to see what's been going on, how the pharmacy's been, performing with the accounting file, but it's also, is the price that's on the table here, is it reasonable? Is it, is this a fair market value, so on and so forth. So there's so much that you can pull out of this accounting information.
pharmacy accounting is one area that's maybe more complex than other types of accounting that's out there. So if it's a CPA firm that maybe that's their only pharmacy client that they have, they might be, trying their best to reflect an accurate picture. But then when you get in there, there's lots of different variables that you as a buyer might want to take into consideration. How are DRR fees being considered? Are the receivables there? Is inventory reasonable? So there's a lot of different areas that if it's going to be your biggest investment of your life, likely in that pharmacy, you want to make sure somebody looks at it and what's being reflected isn't just you're purchasing off of a gut feeling, but it's actually what's going on in the pharmacy at the time that you're looking to purchase it.
So that's the financial due diligence. You have somebody like Sykes and Company go in, and I call it really scrubbing the books. And let's make sure, when the seller says to me, look, my pharmacy gross is this, my net profit is this, my EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization is such and such. That's very well and good. But let's to quote President Reagan, we can trust but verify. And so let's really get down and verify what they're telling us. Okay, we put that aside. Then we have what I call the transactional due diligence. And that's where, as the attorneys, we're buying this corporation lock, stock, and barrel as a going concern. Well, let's make sure the articles of incorporation are in good standing with the Secretary of State's office. Let's make sure that it has paid its franchise taxes to the state. Let's make sure that the organizational documents of the corporation are properly set up. Let us order what's called a UCC lien search. Let's find out if any banks have any liens against the assets of the corporation. These are some of the steps for what I call the transactional due diligence. And then you have what's called healthcare due diligence, because remember, with the stock purchase, this corporation that I bought, it's mine, warts and all. And so I've got to know what it's doing. Well, from a healthcare regulatory standpoint, one question I've got is, Scotty's Pharmacy Inc. shows wonderful revenue, wonderful profits. But I want to take a look at how it, as a corporation, gets its referrals from hospitals and doctors and others. Is it paying kickbacks? Is it paying prohibited inducements? Is it doing things that are against the law? Meaning that once I take the corporation over, that I've got to stop doing those things, and all of a sudden my income goes out the window. And so, I need to make sure that the business model of this corporation that I'm buying is not violating any state or federal anti-fraud laws. In addition to that, it is likely that most, if not all, of the PBM contracts will stay in place with the corporation that I just bought. However, let's make sure. We need to look at the contracts and let's see if they are going to stay in place. And it is highly likely that we have to give advance notice to the various PBMs saying, hey, I'm about to buy the stock of Scotty's Pharmacy. I'm letting you know in advance. That's really important. And then I guess the third tranche when it comes to healthcare regulatory due diligence is let's just make sure that the pharmacy license for Scotty's Pharmacy Inc. is okay. The state of North Carolina, for example, where Scotty is the state pharmacy board okay with his pharmacy license? What about his NPI? Is that in good shape? What about his DEA permit? Is that is that also in good shape? I just want to make sure that whatever it is that's part of this corporation after February 1, after I'm now the proud owner, I want to make sure I don't have to deal with problems with the state board or the DEA. So those are the three categories of due diligence. And again, it's like having a home inspector inspecting your home. He's going to inspect plumbing, electricity, foundation. Here, for the pharmacy, we're inspecting finances, corporate setup, and then healthcare regulatory.
And Jeff,
So-
sorry, Scotty. Let me just ask this real quick. Jeff, I know I've heard you mention, and I know in a lot of the transactions we work with your group with, you guys do add sometimes some verbiage there in the contracts that protects against some of this stuff, as far as maybe holding back some funds from closing to protect for a certain period of time if something does arise.
Yeah, that's very important, Bonnie. The two most important provisions in a stock purchase agreement, in my mind, are number one, representations and warranties, otherwise called reps and warranties, and indemnification. And that's where, when I'm buying the stock of Scotty's Pharmacy Inc., Scotty individually is making certain promises in the contract. He's saying, Jeff, I represent to you that that everything I'm about to tell you is true. That I'm running a compliant pharmacy. I'm not having any problems with any governmental agencies. I'm doing everything the right way. And so those are his promises to me. And then we have the indemnification section that says, oh, but if after closing I find out that that's not true, then Scotty's liable. He needs to pay me money. But that's very well and good. But attorneys like to have, there's a slogan that attorneys use, and it's called "Possession is 9/10 of the law." Well, here's an example.
Is that a Texas term as well?
Well, that's a unit.
Because I think we're on like number 5 for
universal.
Texas terms. I'm counting.
That's pretty universal. But how this works is I could give Bonnie a $10 million promissory note. So now I am legally obligated to pay Bonnie $10 million. So what?
He's not going to pay.
I'm not going to pay.
Have to sell that house and ask.
Yeah. But we don't have debtors' prisons.
Right.
So there's nothing she can do to me. So I don't possess $10 million. Well, same thing with Scotty. He's making these promises in the stock purchase agreement, but then after closing, I find out that some of these promises are not true, and Scotty therefore owes me a bunch of money. Well, he can just look at me and say, I don't have it.
Right.
He'll try to get it. That doesn't do me any good. And so what you said, Bonnie, is, in terms of a holdback, possession is 9/10 of the law. So if the purchase price is, I don't know, $1 million, I would love to pay $800,000 at closing and then to hold back $200,000. So if sometime after closing I find out that what Scotty told me is not true, then I've got something to go against, to offset against. Possession is 9/10 of the law. It's really important to possess, as a buyer, to possess some of the seller's money.
Yeah.
To protect yourself.
Yeah. And the IRS is a little slow, so 2 years would probably be good to hold back for those tax returns in case there was any.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's these are some basic steps that the buyer can take to protect itself.
Yep.
IRS is, shoot, I mean, they're almost 3 years behind.
Yeah. I mean, and this is just a this is just a negotiating point,
right?
Because if I'm representing the buyer, I like for the holdback to be 5 years.
Okay.
If I'm representing the seller, I want the holdback to be 3 months.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Depends on what side you're on.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And how early on can someone start to get together a team to kind of start this due diligence process? Is this something you kind of get people involved right in the final hour, right before you sign? You get somebody to come in and check in on it, or at what part of the negotiation process do you usually a potential buyer start to have people involved, others outside?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kendall. And the answer I'm about to give you is self-serving, but it's really important that the buyer get in place at the beginning. The CPA, such as Sykes and Company, the attorneys such as Brown Fortunato, and a bank, whatever bank that the buyer wants to use. But let's get the team in place at the beginning, so that the buyer can avoid mistakes. we have all seen, I think all four of us have seen many times, where the buyer tries to do it on the cheap and tries to do it without an attorney, or tries to do it without a CPA, or tries to do it with a local CPA or attorney that doesn't have experience in the pharmacy acquisition space. And then all of a sudden, in the 11th hour, they want to close, and now problems have arisen. And then they call Sykes and Company, they call Brown Fortunato, and say, "Oh my gosh, what do we do?" And it's kind of a fire drill. It's kind of a mess. And so it's better to get us in place at the very beginning. I'll just give you one example. We just had, Sykes and Company know who these folks are because they refer them to us. But we have some folks that are buying a pharmacy, and they're using a real smart local attorney, and good people, very honest. But they signed everything and they're ready to close, and all of a sudden they looked around and said, "Oh my gosh, I guess there's some healthcare regulatory things that we need to do." And so they called us, and now we're jumping in. I think Sykes and Company is also working with them, just trying to, we're having to do a big timeout and say, "Everybody just back off, let's catch our breath, and let's work through these issues." Well, it would have been a lot easier if Sykes and Company and Brown Fortunato had been brought in at the beginning.
Right.
This is, it's one of the biggest transactions you'll ever do. You want to, don't want to go out there and just wing it. Right? I mean, come on. I mean,
yeah.
Suck it up, do it right, and get it done correctly, and save you some headache down the road.
Agreed.
And Jeff, I think you would agree that the due diligence portion is it's always important, but probably definitely more important for a stock purchase than the asset purchase.
Well, that's a good point, Bonnie, because with an asset purchase, when Jeff Pharmacy Inc. is buying the inventory and computers and paper clips from Scotty's Pharmacy Inc., my corporation is not inheriting any liabilities.
Right.
Okay? So whatever crazy stuff that Scotty's Pharmacy Inc. did before closing, that's not my problem.
Right.
On the other hand, with a stock purchase, if I'm now the proud owner of this corporation that has been in existence for the last 8 years, and it has done some crazy things in the past, that is now my problem, because I've just paid $2 million for this thing, and I don't want that $2 million to be a total waste. So I've got to go in now and clean up the mess. And so due diligence with an asset purchase, sure, it's important. But due diligence with a stock purchase is really, really important.
Yep. I have a question. I've heard you use this term many times, and so is livestock and barrel and also a Texas term?
Did you say livestock?
Is it livestock?
Lock, stock, and barrel.
Is it lock, stock? I don't know.
Lock, stock, and barrel, yeah. I don't know if that's a Texas term or if that's a universal term. Lock, stock, and barrel.
Alan's favorite is that mark-to-market thing that we still haven't figured out, Jeff.
Well,
that's an Allen term there.
Yeah.
Alan's probably the smartest person I know.
Every time you say, is it lock, stock, and barrel?
Stock, and barrel.
Lock, stock, and barrel.
Now,
I think of Alan's mark-to-market.
Yeah, well, Alan is one of my best friends. He's one of the smartest guys I know. He surrounds himself by smart people, and he keeps talking mark to market. And I just think pulled that out of thin air.
I did Google it. It's there.
It's there. So
it's there, mark to market.
I've got to accept it.
We studied that extensively in college.
Really?
Yeah.
It's part of the CPA, everything. Yeah.
I don't remember mark-to-market. Maybe
you had to do mark-to-market accounting.
Usually, Jeff, we finish it off with the bottom line. So it's kind of like your key takeaway or your one item you would want listeners to think about at the end. So we all take turns giving one sentence.
I got one.
Go ahead.
Mine's simple.
Bonnie, get us started.
Start us off, Bonnie.
Mine is call Jeff. Call Jeff. That's it. I'm serious. Like, you guys, if you're looking at buying a pharmacy, especially a stock purchase, call Jeff.
I think mine's is I think buying a pharmacy is likely going to be your biggest investment. And there's, generally speaking, the cheap route with something like that is just not worth it. It's not worth the risk that's involved and how much you can end up paying in the long run just because of one of so many factors going wrong. Can really cost you. It could be one of several things. So just go ahead and do the due diligence to get it done right.
Okay. Kendall, that was more than one sentence.
And it was many different topics, but good job.
Yeah.
Overachiever.
From my standpoint, I guess there are two things, and that is number one to piggyback on what Kendall said, bring in your team at the beginning. Sykes and Company or Brown Fortunato, we're not going to overdo it at the beginning. I mean, we're going to do minimum necessary at the beginning just to make sure that you're going down the right path. And then if you're going down the right path, then we can jump in with all fours. But make sure you get your team in place at the beginning. And then number two, due diligence is just critical. Let's just make sure I am okay with a client with a stock purchase inheriting some skeletons. I'm fine with that, as long as we know what those skeletons are in advance.
Yep.
No surprises. Scotty, what about you?
I couldn't say it any better myself, Jeff, so I'll just say this. Don't mess with Texas.
I love it.
That's my bottom line.
Lock, stock, and barrel. And
Lock, stock, and barrel.
I'm going to end it on a Texas
what was
term.
that?
Don't mess
And
with
what was
Texas.
the new one we learned
All
about
hat,
the talker?
all hat, no cat.
All hat,
No cattle.
and no
All
cattle.
Well, Jeff, we appreciate you coming
Yes.
on and blessing us with your time, and appreciate the partnership we have with you guys, and it's always a pleasure to have you. So good to see you, and hope it's a great year for you guys.
Well, you too, Scotty, and from our standpoint, Brown Fortunato, we love working with your team. You're friends. I trust
Yeah.
you. You guys are the best of the best. So it's but other than that, you guys are the best of the best.
We'll see
All right,
you at
we
the next workshop.
appreciate
Jeff.
it.
You got
you,
it.
Jeff.
Bye bye.
Okay.
See you now.
Counting is
Bye-bye.
best.
Take care.
For you to stress, go online and request from the best. We the best. Sykes and Company. We the best. Sykes and Company. Yes.